Chris Maddox for the crossover alongside Howard Beck and Ben Pickman. Guys, Utah and Denver are both looking like strong playoff contenders this year, potentially to upset the apple cart with those two teams out in LA. Howard, which of the two teams, the Nuggets or Jazz, do you see as the bigger threat in the Western Conference?
Well, Chris, the Jazz can certainly make a strong case because they are near the top of the charts in both offense and defense right now. And we know this is a team that has been elite defensively for many years running, and that should be a really strong case for them. And yet, I think it's the Nuggets. I absolutely think it's the Nuggets, and I don't think it's actually that close. And the reason is this: when you get to the postseason, the thing you need most is elite scoring and playmaking. And they've got that with Jokic and Murray. You've got the emergence of Michael Porter Jr. So you've got three big time scorers to throw up against the Lakers or the Clippers, the LA teams that you're presumably having to go through. The other thing is that Jokic is an advantage in and of himself. Who on the Lakers, for instance, is going to deal with him? We know Montrezl Harrell can't deal with Jokic. We've seen that play before. Is Marc Gasol at his age going to be able to hang with him for most of a game? Or do you then have to go to Anthony Davis and burn him out, potentially dealing with Jokic at one end when you need him so much offensively at the other end? And I just like the Nuggets' overall collection of talent and depth, and especially at the wings, where they have multiple guys that they could throw at LeBron or multiple guys they could throw at Kawhi and Paul George. I just don't think the Jazz, when it comes down to it in the postseason, have the offensive dynamism and the versatility defensively, especially at the wings, to hang with the LA teams.
I think that's certainly a fair point. And I thought a lot about the postseason series between the two last year, right? If Mike Conley's game-winning three-pointer falls and suddenly the Jazz are advancing and the Nuggets are going home, do we think about these two teams differently? But in the end, I still agree with you, Howard. I think the Nuggets have the higher ceiling in the postseason, and you mentioned the big reason why, and it's their center in the middle, Nikola Jokic, right? You look at him right now, career highs in points, in rebounds, and assists. His scoring in particular, up to 27 points per game, up from 20 last year. And you saw it against Utah just on Sunday when the two teams played. He scored 47 points, and he looked dominant, going up against him and getting anything he wanted over Rudy Gobert and a number of other players on the Utah Jazz. And certainly I think what Utah is doing is legitimate, right? You mentioned it. They're a top 6 defense, a top 5 offense. They're certainly, I think, one of the top 4 or 5 best teams in the Western Conference. But the Nuggets having a player of Jokic's caliber puts them in a tier above the Utah Jazz, in my opinion. So I like Denver if we're taking one of the two.
Now, these are fair points, but what you said there, Ben, like these two teams last year were separated by one shot. That Mike Conley three-pointer, that goes down, and maybe we're having a different conversation about the playoffs entirely. And I look at these two teams, which one got measurably better? Well, I think it's pretty clear the Jazz got measurably better. They get Bogdanovic back into the mix, and he's a 20-point-ish per game scorer that would have been pretty valuable to them in that series against Denver. You've got Mike Conley, who in year 2 looks so much more comfortable in this system than he did in year 1. This looks like the Mike Conley we saw all those years in Memphis, and not the one that struggled to understand his new role with this team last year. You also have Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, who are seemingly past all the drama from last season. I mean, they got into the bubble, and no one was sure if they even liked each other, during that stretch, because everything that happened right before the NBA shut down. So I look at this Jazz team as being, potentially a more talented team than the one from the Nuggets, at least when it comes to 1 through 5. A couple things that worry me. One is the lack of dynamism, as you pointed out, Howard, especially in that front court with a guy like Gobert at the 5. And it does feel like, Howard, I'm putting a lot of pressure on Jordan Clarkson to deliver in the playoffs. Jordan Clarkson is a front runner for 6th man of the year right now. He has been terrific for them coming off the bench, but he effectively is their bench to a certain degree. And I'm not so confident that Jordan Clarkson is going to be consistent yet in the playoffs.
I mean, look, I love what Jordan Clarkson has become in Utah. He is playing his role to the absolute hilt. It's the most efficient version of Jordan Clarkson we've ever seen. And I think that's another large part of why the Jazz have made these steps forward and why they are hovering near the top of the league in offensive efficiency. Jordan Clarkson plus Conley being more comfortable, probably a little more healthy too. Donovan Mitchell and the steps he's taken. Bojan Bogdanovic being back in the starting lineup. Like, all of that matters, Chris. And it does make them, I think, a potent offensive team. But the playoffs, as we know, are different. And having multiple guys who can create, who can get their shot off anywhere, and who can score at an elite level, I think is just critically important. And I just think that Nuggets grouping, that trio of Murray and Porter Jr. and Jokic, it's just really hard to beat. And I think that those three together are going to have an ability to push the Lakers and the Clippers in a way that I don't think the Jazz offense can.
One shot. That's all that separated these two teams in the playoffs last year. I'm very curious to see what happened if they would meet again. For more, check us out over at SI.com.